Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be welcoming Mr. Saahil Menon. Saahil is currently an investment analyst for JP Morgan in London, UK, and is a great example of a young individual who spent a lot of effort, incredible effort, into gaining as much of an industry experience and as diverse of an industry experience before graduating. Saahil has also served as a finance intern for the Government of Abu Dhabi, a spring intern for Lazard, and he has been also an investment advisory intern for the Century Private Wealth. He has launched his own platform in 2019, the Dividend Payout, aiming to inspire and educate teenagers across the globe, offering insights in investing and equity analysis. I could very much say that we're both attempting to offer quality advice and offer industry insights to the youth. And this interview aims to describe Shahil's journey and offer a framework of the practical skills and problem-solving capabilities heard through his journey. Thus, this interview aims to educate the young generation wishing to enter the investment banking, emerging markets, and equity analysis field. More importantly, through my interaction with Shahil, you will understand the fundamental and advanced principles to nail your job interview. And I would like to sincerely thank him for allocating his valuable time to talk to me, reflect upon his journey, and offer his advice towards students and aspiring young professionals wishing to enter the industry. My first question to you would be, why did you want to join the business and investment sector to begin with? Why did you develop an interest in that field?
Sure. So, in terms of business and investments, this is something that started for me when I was 15 or 16.
Mhm.
I started trading on the side on my own. I had a friend in school who was a bit of a computer geek, and I could see that he was coding his own trading platform in class one day. And so I approached him and we talked about it, and we're still really good friends to this day. And so from there, I started developing a bit of interest in markets in general. So I opened an account, which gives you the 100,000 in free money. And basically, the way I learned about markets, I was just randomly allocate that money to places and then try and figure out why stock X went up or why this asset went down. And it's sort of a game that you play with yourself to try and figure out markets and figure out how investing works. And then where that transitioned from more of a hobby to professional life is I sort of carried on my interest in investing throughout high school, throughout uni. And then I also realized that there was a certain part of me that also enjoyed the relationship side of things. And so I tried to sort of figure out which profession or which job, maybe even which company I can get into that has both the investment side of things and the relationship side of things. And so private banking and JP Morgan seemed like the best fit of both of these. And so that's how it sort of happened.
Can you give me an idea of, because you mentioned the soft skill part, relationship part. So what is the ratio, like the analytical expertise that you need to develop and the soft skills that you need to develop?
So I think it changes as you progress through the corporate ladder. At the beginning, I think you can get away with having more technical skills and less soft skills.
Mhm.
But each year you move up, the requirement for soft skills increases. If you have them both when you start off as an analyst, that's fantastic. But when you get to senior associate or VP, then there's no negotiating anymore. You have to have both the soft skills and the technical part. I enjoy learning soft skills a lot more than technicals. So I think that sort of helps when it comes to speaking with people, building relationships, talking to clients. But there are some people I work with that are absolutely brilliant technically, and maybe not so much with the soft skills. But it's okay right now because they're still at the younger stage. But once they move to VP, they're really going to have to start working on the soft skill and relationship management side of things too. So the short answer would be they both matter. The proportion would have to become more equal as you go up the corporate ladder.
As I understand, climbing the corporate ladder is by default something that analysts want to do. So by default, they need to develop these skills. It's not as if you can say to each their own, so you can stay technical all your life, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
So let me take you back a couple of years to your beginnings, basically, because I want to pull the veil on your train of thought as well. I want to see how your train of thought developed as you progressed through your roles.
Mhm.
So can you talk to me about your role with General Motors? Let's start from there. How did that happen?
Sure. So General Motors was quite a long time ago now. It was maybe six years ago. This was my first internship,
Mhm.
and it was born out of a requirement from our school. When we were in year 10, I think we were given the task of finding a place to do an internship and spending about a week or 2 weeks there. And I'm from Dubai. I did school in Dubai, and it's sort of less like the UK where you have a strict application process for getting into places and a system of spring week converted to summer internship converted to full-time job. Here you kind of just ask around, maybe tap some of your family members or your family friends and see what you can come up with. So even though I always had an interest in finance, getting into finance here, even in as an internship, is very restricted. And so the next best thing I thought was let me get into a conglomerate or a large corporation and go into the finance division there because that's a sort of easier way to ease into finance. And so one of our really close family friends works at General Motors, and so I tapped him for an opportunity to just spend a couple of days kind of just shadowing and learning the tricks of the trade, so to speak. And so that was it was an interesting 3 or 4 day experience. You do just basic tasks of presentations, maybe a bit of market research, but the interesting part is if you prove, or as I tried to prove my interest in the subject matter, opportunities kind of opened up. And so on my last day, my family friend ended up asking the managing director of that office for 15 minutes of his time for me to present whatever market research I'd done just out of nowhere. And so that was a nice sort of conclusion to the whole experience and a real first taste, maybe, of how
Mhm.
things work in the real world.
That is why I'm asking these questions, like about your very first beginning, like your first internship, because I can see the element of you being brave, being able to do that presentation, and then you start capitalizing on those skills. Because let's be honest, JP Morgan didn't happen overnight. So I could straight up ask you about it, but I want to see the adversity that you fought through because I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah.
So if we talk about your subsequent roles in the Abu Dhabi government and Lazard, can you tell me how you transitioned into these roles as well?
Sure. So again, the Abu Dhabi government role was again a very short experience, but very, very eye-opening in terms of how governments work with corporations. And so obviously now that I work at an investment bank, I understand how banks advise governments and sovereign wealth funds, and I understand the relationship a lot better. But at that time, it was sort of my first taste of how really large consulting firms have multi-million dollar projects with governments here. And so that was really interesting. Getting into that role was, again, it's just about asking all the people you know, see what type of opportunity you can get. If they say no the first time because what you want is a little too restrictive, it's a little too niche, and it has too many barriers to entry. It's all about kind of finding the next best thing because once you're inside, you can kind of navigate your way around and get the information you need. So the Abu Dhabi government experience was a lot like General Motors. Lazard was a little bit more structured because this was in the UK. And so that was a numbers game. I'm sure we'll get to the JP Morgan experience later, but like Lazard and JP Morgan in their application processes, it really is a lot of a numbers game.
Mhm.
So with Lazard, I had applied to a number of different, maybe 20, 25 different places for a spring internship. And you really just have to grind through every single one. And you understand so quickly how easy it is to be rejected. You could have everything they're looking for on paper, but just because of things like timing, one or two characteristics that are mismatched, the rejection rate is so high. And so that's a very good sort of first taste into the industry of how easy it is to be rejected and how hard it is to maybe potentially land a role. And so when we talk about adversity, that whole application process with Lazard, that was definitely a tedious process. The JP Morgan one was even worse, but we'll talk about that later.
So, if I ask on like a personal level, and you are allowed to decline the question as well if you feel it's too personal, what do you believe were the traits that allowed you to get into Lazard, like subjectively?
Sure.
Is there something that you saw and you thought, okay, this is what helped me to get in there?
Yeah. So I think with Lazard specifically, because this was pre-COVID, so I actually got to do the interview at the office. And I noticed two things that I think they particularly appreciated. One is communication skills. So in a world where everyone can be very technical or very good behind the screen when writing, I think people are a lot more looking for those people that they can comfortably put in front of clients or comfortably put in front of senior people at the firm. And oral communication is something that's super important there. And so the fact that I presented myself as a young guy who knew a lot, even though I really didn't. But if you present yourself in a way that you're confident with what you do know, I think that's something that people really appreciate. And so very strong oral communication is perhaps the first thing. The second thing I would say is an affinity for numbers. With every question they were asking me, whether it was a qualitative question or a quantitative question is regardless. Every single question they asked, I brought an answer that had some element of quantitative backing to it. And that really helps you drive the point home, but it also makes them feel like you really know what you're talking about. It makes them feel like you've done your research, that you've been able to read through pages and pages of information and accurately pick out the relevant statistics. And so those two put together, good communication and then an appropriate or responsible use of numbers, I think were two things that stood out quite well.
You are very articulate. Like it shows. I believe these two tips will help remove a lot of ambiguity for people who want to into this field. Like substantiate what they with reference on affinity of numbers, and basically be a good communicator. Like make them feel as if they can put you to talk to clients straight up from your internship role. So if we move to LSE and M&A, how did you transfer these skills to that role?
Sorry, you broke off in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Are you asking about how the skills from LSE M&A Group went into JP Morgan?
No, I'm asking how the skills from Lazard went into the LC M&A.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that was another interesting experience because they were coincidental. So the application into Lazard and the M&A Group were happening at the same time. And so I distinctly remember them working in both ways. So in the M&A Group, I had my first introduction to modeling the different types of valuation techniques, different ways to read about deals. Deal reports and research reports are a lot like academic journals. You don't necessarily want to read every single line. Even with a deal report or a prospectus, you read the first paragraph, you skim through the important bits, and then you read the conclusion. And that's how you sort of productively get through material like that. And so that was something that the M&A Group taught us that I was able to use in my prep for Lazard. Because when I was reading through Lazard deals, it was very easy to apply this framework and substantiate what's important and what's not important. And then going the other way, Lazard really helped when it came to the different deals that are happening. Lazard, even though it's a boutique investment bank, deal with a lot of different industries. And so I remember we were having a discussion with a panelist in the LSE M&A Group, and they were talking to us only about the very popular mergers and acquisitions like technology, maybe industrials, but Lazard are really big in debt capital markets as well. So they have really strong relationship with governments from what I understood and what's in public information. And so bringing that to the table in the LSE group and engaging in discussion there, that's always a pretty interesting discussion that comes from it.
So you were trying to read the business model of every company. You were not just, blindly getting into the company, executing your role, and that's it. So I think this is also a very important message that we're getting from this. And I assume all that experience transferred to you creating basically your own company, the Dividend Payout. So how did that happen?
So the dividend payout links to the topic we were talking about earlier about investing. So I had started investing when I was quite young, and I could see the benefits of it from so many different angles. First of all, just very simply, you start making a bit of your own money, which whether you're 15 or 50, that always is a great thing. And so that was the first thing that made me realize, okay, investing is actually really beneficial. But even more than that, it has certain traits or certain habits that it builds in you. You start looking at things differently. You start looking at purchasing and spending differently. Instead of just looking at, I don't know, a wallet perhaps that's for $200. I don't look at it as just a wallet for $200. I start looking at how many trades would I need to make that 200 back, or how much do I need to invest to generate enough to pay for the wallet. After you start investing, you stop sort of accepting the amount of money you have going down. You only want it to go upwards. And so that skill was something that I really appreciated, and I felt like it wasn't talked about enough. And so that's where the dividend payout was sort of born. I wanted to basically bridge the gap between people wanting to invest and people actually doing it. And I thought that in a world where we have so much jargon in the investing world, so much esoteric language, it would be the easiest if someone like myself, who's young and knows how to speak in young people language, so to speak, would just write an article or two per week explaining how to invest to teenagers, where they can be doing it, what's the best way to do it, which apps they could be using for actual investing, which apps they could be using to do the research. I just sort of looked at myself as a guide, not a guru, just a guide to shorten the gap or bridge the gap between people's idea of investing and them actually doing it. And so that's where the dividend payout was born. And so I started writing an article or two articles a week. One article would talk about basic investing skills, or how to basically start thinking about investing and start doing it properly. And the other article would just discuss markets. So I would discuss a stock, or I would discuss a particular industry and just give my thoughts on it. And my family friends still make fun of me to this day. I got all the stock picks right, except for one. I once recommended Wirecard. It was a complete fraud. And, but yeah, that's beside the point.
So, first of all, what you said, that young people language, that is exactly what I'm doing now, because I am not an expert, and I believe it's vital. You don't need to reach like the expert status to be able to put information out there. And I think this is how it starts. First of all, you put out theoretical information with a little bit of, a practical twist. As you develop through your hardcore roles in investment banking for you, per se, that's when you are going eventually to transition to a business where it's gonna produce like actual practical solutions in investment banking. And with your mindset, I believe you will do it eventually. I don't think you're going to give up. Like, you already have the freelancing in your blood. You're not going to just, give up out of nowhere and not create a business. But have you ever thought how difficult it is to find your niche? Is it difficult in general to do it in investment banking?
Yeah. In a way, I believe if you are actively looking for it, it might be a lot harder. From my own experience and from the people around me, those who do something different and find a particular interest, it kind of naturally came to them. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive. By that, I don't mean that just sit around and wait for something to come for you. I actually mean the opposite. Try different things. try a bunch of different things as you grow older, whether you're a student or even if you're a young professional. Just try different industries, different jobs, different niches, and you'll figure out what you like and what you don't like. And once you figure out what you like, then you have the platform to put that into action, right? So I did a bunch of different things when I was a teenager. I did guitar, I did martial arts, I did sports. I found investing when I was 15, 16, 17, slightly later. But even though I found it later, the fact that I was open to trying different things gave me my interest. And then I decided to put that into action through the dividend payout, through internships, and now through the job. So I would definitely say try a bunch of different things, even if they don't work out. That's how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to be interested in everything, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be open to exploring different lanes.
And that friction with different roles, I assume, like if you're perspicacious enough, you can extract the information you want. At some point, by trial and error efforts, you will be successful. So if we move on to JP Morgan, I assume, my assumption is that it was a dream of yours. So because I have a lot of friends who would die to get into a company. Describe to me how this happened. Basically, talk me through the motions of you applying for JP Morgan.
Sure. So as I'd mentioned with the Lazard experience, applying for JP Morgan was also majorly a numbers game. I applied to nearly 40 places. I think I was rejected from almost every single one except JP Morgan. And
That's
that's it.
quite an achievement, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one.
It
Because
is.
you would assume JP Morgan would be very picky and maybe the first few to reject. But here's where it's an interesting experience as a whole, because that whole application process teaches you a lot of different things, right? It teaches you resilience because you have no choice but to consistently apply even though you see rejections. There was one particular week in mid-November of 2020 when I had applied to a bunch of places beforehand, but in that week I received a rejection. I woke up to a rejection every single day of the week, Monday through Sunday. So even on the weekends, I was receiving a rejection in the morning. And so this is not uncommon. A lot of my friends around me have the same thing. And the thing, I guess, that gets you to the end and gets you that offer is keeping your head down and consistently applying more. You get rejected, accept it, try and understand where you went wrong. And you can do that by looking at the application process. So if you see that you're consistently being rejected at the first stages or the second stage, you should understand that something's going wrong with either your recorded video interviews or something's going wrong with your test skills. If you're being rejected towards the end, you'll understand that it's less of a technical issue and more of a soft skills issue because the final stages are more about interviews. And so if you're getting rejected there, then it's something to do with soft skills. So really open your eyes and try and understand which part of the application process you're going wrong. And that'll help you get the resilience in and finally apply to more places and then get that final offer. And so to keep that answer short, JP Morgan experience, it was very long. It was 5-6 months perhaps between my first sending off the application and actually getting the offer. But it turned out worth it in the end.
So what you're saying also is very important because a lot of students they're placing importance on receiving feedback. And most of the times, these companies, they will reject you, but they will not give you feedback because they just have such high volumes of applications. So you need to like study your applications, not just like blindly upload them, hope for the best, study them meticulously.
And it's up to you, right? Because the firms, I believe I've only heard of boutique firms like Lazard, for example, that if you're rejected, they give you feedback. They call you or they email you and they give you feedback. But for these large firms, JP Morgan had 4,000 applications just to the private bank. And overall, across all divisions, I believe it was closer to 40,000 applications. They cannot be sending out feedback for every single applicant that is rejected, right? So a lot of the time it's on you and it's your responsibility to talk to people and try and figure out where you might have gone wrong. And the people that do that, I've noticed around me, are those that get the offers, and not just the offers, but the offers they want.
Absolutely, I fully agree. And you know this better than I do. My next question would be about climbing the corporate ladder within JP Morgan up to the point you are now as an investment analyst. If you can touch up on your duties and maybe, okay, let's start with this, your duties first.
Sure. So the way I put it, and I'll preface by saying it's quite a vague way of putting it, but the way I think about it is that the investment analyst job is twofold. First, you're there to just help the people senior to you with whatever they need. It could be something actually interesting and useful, like portfolio reviews, research, or it could be something a lot more admin heavy and mundane. Either way, our job, or one part of our job as investment analysts, is just to help make their lives easier, no matter what it is. The second part of the job, I would say, is you're there to learn. You're genuinely, it's one of the first or few places where you're being paid to learn. And so the best way it was described to me is that you just want to be a sponge. Once you get in that environment, we have so much thought leadership going on around us. People who I sit next to are on Bloomberg and on CNBC every week. We have morning meetings every morning at 8 a.m. And 1 p.m. for the US morning meeting. So there's so much thought leadership going on, and it's on you to sit there and kind of absorb everything. And so those are the two ways I would put duties: is just first, you're there to help the people senior to you and make their lives easier with whatever the task you're paid to learn.
So it goes back, I said, to what we said about soft skills and relationships as well. So you've been in JP Morgan for a year and a half, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, I've only been there 5 months, less than 5 months.
5 months
So
analyst role.
correct. I was a summer intern last year. And so on LinkedIn, it shows a year and a half.
Basically, you've had 3 roles, and I assume there were gaps in between. So that's why the timeline is a year and a half. But what I see is that from very early on, you need to develop these relationships. It's not as if you need to wait 5 or 6 years to reach a VP level as equity trader of a department per se. You need to develop these
Mhm,
skills as an intern.
mhm.
So, and I like the fact that you described this bifold dynamic within your role. So with all that in mind, let's say that we have an undergraduate or graduate finances or business student who want to get into the investment banking for a big corporate company. How would you advise them to proceed with being an undergraduate? What skills should they build before graduating the university?
Sure. It's a great question. I think the first skill is something we've already spoken about, and that's oral communication. I think that's crucial. The second thing I would say is the skill of entrepreneurship. This is something that you're doing yourself with this website. I wouldn't say this is absolutely essential, but if you have it, it's a fantastic way to separate yourself. And so a lot of my interviews were dominated by the dividend payout because they were very curious, whether it was an associate interviewing me or a managing director interviewing me. They were very, very interested in the rationale behind starting the dividend payout, how I was able to maintain it throughout uni, the different skills I learned through it. So showing a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit is something that they look at very, very highly. The third thing I would say is throughout the application process, and once you're in the job as well, always try and go the extra mile or show the initiative of going the extra mile, because this is something that most people don't do. And in hindsight, or if you really think about it, it doesn't take that much effort to go the extra mile. But the fact that you do it, and if you have a positive attitude while you're doing it, it goes a very long way. So the payoff between the marginal effort you have to put in and the reward that it gives is very, very nice. And I can give you an example. Throughout my interviews, for example, I would always make sure that I had something that would go the extra mile. And that doesn't mean that I talk about my experience with the LSE M&A group or any other uni society, because even though it's super beneficial, everybody is part of a university society, right? You want to go a bit further than that. And so I'd done my research. I love watching the news. I love thought leadership. And so I had gotten myself quite familiar with a couple of people from JP Morgan that were consistently on Bloomberg, on CNBC, and familiarized myself with their thoughts. And so I could bring that to the interview and engage with that. First of all, the interviewer is quite impressed that I know who these people are and which markets they cover, what their thoughts are. And then if you engage with their thoughts, if you say what you agree with, what you disagree with, you're showing even more skills, right? You're showing initiative, you're showing analytical skills, you're showing communication skills. So my point is that when you go the extra mile, you only have to put a little bit of effort to get a lot back in return, because you show a number of different skills and it's almost always taken very, very positively by the interviewer. And so those are the three things I would leave students with. And that's something I would be telling myself if back in the day as well, is focus on communication, focus on entrepreneurial spirit.
Great. Okay, so what I was saying basically is that what I see with your approach on interviews as well is that you zoom out and of course you realize how important the analytical and technical competency is, but you're like consistently thinking, what can I do to have an edge over the others? What can I do? Oh, I can go and talk to these people who are associated with JP Morgan from CNBC, for instance, that you mentioned. And then you go into the interview and you transfer this, you induce this into your speech. And then they're thinking, okay, this guy, first of all, has an entrepreneurial side. So you have a story to say. Second of all, you're interactive, so you are a good communicator, you're talking with people. And these are golden skills that students don't necessarily think of, because I am sure, like me as an engineer and you as an investment banker, we are taught to be very analytical on our approach, very technical. We're not necessarily taught how to interact, how to unlock in university. So the point that you brought up is very important. So I'm conscious that you have to jump off to another meeting. So have a beautiful day, Saahil, and I will be in contact for the article and the video. So have a beautiful day.
Perfect. Look forward to it, man. Cheers. Bye-bye.